How's it going, guys? Honest Sarcastic with the Hyperloops here. So today, this time you're used to hearing the meta music and the regional rundowns. I'll probably talk a smidgen about some of the stuff that occurred. Well, not stuff that occurred, but stuff that won. But really just want to go over kind of the meta as a whole, and particularly talk about, quote-unquote, broken. So, first thing first, I'm not going to have this whatever long podcast talking about stuff's too broken, it needs to get nerfed, yada yada yada. That's not how I work. We will be talking about cards that were probably printed that were stronger than intended, so that we kind of always build around, and realistically those are going to be the best decks, the decks that can build around things that are the most broken. So, or the best cards. So there's always going to be arguments of, oh, this is too broken, this needs a nerf, blah blah blah. But we're always going to kind of just use whatever's left over for broken, and that's really not going to change. We'll lose one thing, we'll go to the next one, and that's just going to happen over and over. So however they choose to handle it's however they choose to handle it, and we kind of got to move on. Making concerns voiced is kind of how things occur, because realistically we don't know what FFG or organized play really pays attention to. So do they see reports of Rainbow Nines winning 30 events in a row and then decide, oh well, we got to touch this thing? Or is it that there's a public outcry and people sending in complaint emails over and over? Is it the playtesters just going, this is too strong, make adjustments, yada yada? Because it's going to be difficult no matter what they decide to do to make stuff quote unquote fair. Realistically speaking, the way to make things fair is to just have a whole bunch of broken shit, so that there's 12, 14, 20 broken decks, and then we're just gonna have a bunch of shit characters that aren't any good, and we kind of just deal with that and move on. Every set's not gonna be, every card in every single set's not gonna be gold. We're gonna have trash cards, and that's just how it's gonna work. But kind of let's talk about the stuff that you could build around. So this way, people that want to innovate, who haven't really considered this whole concept, could potentially come up with new and better decks. So I'm going to start with essentially a minor breakdown of OTK, since that's the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart. So if we go way back, when 7th Sister came out, there was the whole controversy, or not controversy, just discussion on, if you god rolled every single die, what was the amount of damage you can do via, all the stupid ID9 dice and whatever. And I think it went down and did something stupid 181 damage or something if you hit melee on every single one. Because it was alright, you have the triple untap from, or I think it was a quadra untap. It was supposed to be leadership, price, and then you were fainting somewhere in between. And if we had to have crazy god stuff going on, it was alright, there were aftermaths, and boundless ambition, and kill, your opponent's playing 4 wide or something, so that every time you killed a guy you could get the resource. And then after that it was just alright, well, you're out of resource gaining, but you see all this other stuff, or your opponent casting truces or some crazy shit. But so the gist was, you could do some silly amount over 100 damage if everything went correctly. So there were tons of people trying to essentially build and function the deck. It ended up just dying off pretty much. Then online, so I never really saw that again online for a long time. Then Rebel Trooper tried to make it with the whole I think Stormtrooper, and I forget who the hell the yellow character was. It was pretty much a pseudo Guardian package, but that's where I kind of went off and ran with it and decided, all right, well, I'm going to put the leaderships in because leadership is the other untap. So if the plan is just to suit her up and we're going to lose if she dies, like, we'll cope with that and move on. So function around that ended up with Rainbow because we were trying to do like friends in high places and cheats. So, but the big thing here was that we were effectively looking to try to abuse Seven Sister, ID9 creating ability that got better the more of them you got out, untapping, and then like whatever crazy upgrades we can get down that were just very strong. So then like reusing the untaps with like cheats and friends in high places to stick down 3 drops or like rise again to like help stay alive. But it was a dedicated combo deck. But the precipice is that we were using Seven Sister, who by herself was just like, she's like okay. She's not very good, because if you kind of like think of her, like look at Asage's die. They're very similar. Asage's die is actually considerably better, I believe. I think it has is it a focus and a disrupt instead of a disrupt and a shield? But Asajj has 1 health left and a different ability, with the ability actually probably being greater than Seven Sisters, except it's just not as abusive. So essentially these cards became synergistic for getting the untap. So now your ID9s, you know, if you have 1 upgrade plus that and you get an untap, then if you just use the ability, if you just use the upgrade die, I believe the ability die in the pool, you'll have got some utility card worth 2 value, and then after the untap, you're getting 2 and 3 value. So that right there is astronomical, without even like including Seven Sisters base dice, character dice, and then, you know, any other upgrades you would have gotten. So like it's very strong, but like realistically, leadership has been here since set 1. It's just you couldn't use it very well. So like some of the original concepts were like Luke plus Akbar leadership. So you suit up the Luke, you know, Akbar tries to help you generate resources at the beginning, because back then Blue's upgrade options were pretty atrocious. Like you pretty much had to live and die by 3 drops, and then you had to like try to survive, and there's the whole Vader thing going. And like I ran 4 wide. Other people didn't really run 4 wide. Then you had like the whole Jango Veers and Jango Bala Trooper, and then eventually Phasma Bala Trooper. So like there was stuff going on there. But like the leadership wasn't super potent, or it was potent, but it took too long to get online. Fast forward to around EAW, meta Legacy is coming out. You can much more reliably generate resources. So introducing leadership into the OTK deck was like, oh, okay, like this has something going for it. Later adjustments felt that the deck could do really good stuff, but it needed to do it around round 3. Round 2 was like the earliest you could do it, and that people would just go completely after Seven Sister, and anytime people took cards from your hand, you were just completely boned, because you were stuck with whatever you die rolled. And like, sure, you're gonna god roll sometimes, but sometimes the probability is just not gonna be in your favor. You can, you know, cast an upgrade, cast a piece of removal, and then pitch 3 cards to rerolls, and not see anything favorable. So like there were many times where you would end up leaving dice on the table, and leaving dice on the table is kind of how you end up losing the game more often than not, because you're spending, you know, resources or whatever's going on to get these dice out, and if the die is not doing anything remotely feasible, then the entire intent was just kind of wasted. Like, think of it like if you spend 2 on a holdout blaster, but you never got to use that die. Like, you wasted 2 resources, even though the good intent was there, where you're, over the course of, let's say, a 5-round game, you got to use it 5 times. Using that die 5 times for the total cost of 2 resources is amazing. But if, let's say that's instead I don't know, let's call it a Shoto, and then you never got to use the Shoto in the 3 rounds before your character died. Like, you didn't get to use it at all. You couldn't resolve it with base, you couldn't, like, get a resource, shield, nothing. Like, you literally burned 2 resources for nothing. So then, like, the kind of, like, efficiency metric there is just heavily wasted, and it's awful. We're not running Shoto, but I was just using it as an explanation. So, like, if you cast an Ancient and then your character dies to your opponent resolving, you know, damage, like, you wasted 2 resources. Like, that should at least make the concept understood. So now the thing was that I've always been a big proponent of Night Sister, and I might be, like, the only guy that really kind of, like, forces her all the time. But it's because a lot of the time you're willing to take a damage on a utility character or your side character in order to kind of fix your dice. But the other thing is you get to hamper the opponent quite a bit. Like, not even actually using it, just the threat of using it is just is huge. Pretty much what happened there is that I lost all the yellow cards, picked up more blue and red cards to be more consistent, and since I had lost a good chunk of the removal, I had to adjust accordingly. But we ended up with the pretty much bro TK monstrosity, excuse me, and we're now looking at, you know, round 2 is the feasible round that you're going off, and occasionally you can do some silly crazy stuff round 1 if your opening hand permitted it. Now that we're backed by Night Sister, you can more reliably adjust your dice or fix it so that you're not wasting anything. And the other thing is that with Legacies, we now have access to Maul's lightsaber. So the initial deck in general, when I started to work on it, was with the inclusion of Maul Saber, because Maul Saber, to me, reads quite ridiculously. The thinking is that it has 2, 2, 3, 4 for the damage sides. We'll ignore the fact that it has modifiers and you had to pair it with something else. But 2, 2, 3, 4 is very good for a 3-drop. Like, if you got to think of it, we used Rocket Launcher with FN to go 3, 3, 4, 4. And that second 4 essentially being like that split 2 and 2. And if we used it twice with FN, like, you pretty much won the game. If you kind of follow some of the efficiency metrics that I talk about at times, but it's all over the place, it's that a resource on a die cost kind of, in my mind, is worse than reducing the damage by 1 and removing the resource cost. Because later in the game, that resource cost doesn't matter, and you can resolve it, and like the increase in damage is great, but early on it's pretty bad, because for each resource that we're paying, you're almost equating it to half of an additional die. We have at cards like DH and I forget the stupid blue cards that have like the focus sides for villain, Dark Council and Crystal Ball. So like that's slightly different, because you can pay 1 and generate with those, which is pretty amazing, but we don't use them too often because we want the huge factor of the actual 2-cost upgrades as opposed to multiple ones, which is probably the kind of mistake. Like, we should probably be focusing a bit more on those crazy ones, but that requires like bigger actual character dice and whatnot. So going back, because I'm going to start running on a tangent, paying the resource cost for like a holdout is pretty terrible. You're kind of okay with it when it's doing 3 off of like an X8, but like F11D and all the gun stuff usually had like a pay side like that, and it was kind of tough. Like nowadays I'd much prefer to actually just have 2 in direct, because to me that's just the F11D special, and like I found that to be very good. Much better than getting 2 direct with a pay side usually, because the resources are hard to come by. You get 2 free around, but unless you're starting with like 5 dice, like every time you take a resource, you have to really like weigh the benefit of it versus the damage it would have been. So like if new Boba, or I guess it's the only Boba, if Boba took a resource on his die, you have to realize that he probably had 3 sides that are worth 2 damage. And was that resource worth 2 damage? And like that one equates perfectly fine, but like let's say it's an FN die with a resource on it, you probably take that all day, because you're really only going to get 1 damage or a shield from him, and the resource, like from a cost efficiency metric, is much more beneficial when you include any card in your hand, because so like a card in your hand plus 1 resource usually equates to about 2 damage, whether you're stopping your opponent's 2 damage, doing 2 damage yourself, or trying to like generate it into something else that'll do the equivalent. Like I'd probably say you get about 4 value worth from a 2-cost upgrade at the beginning of the game, and I just went on a tangent again. So back to, God, how did I even get here from OTK? So yeah, it goes back to like efficiency. So Maul Saber, 2, 2, 3, 4, and then assuming you've hit, they don't have shields, you get to do it a second time. So that's a huge amount of damage you're dealing. And then if we do any single untap with it, like let's go base, like the lowest we can do. If you use a Maul Saber twice in a round, and this is not including an untap, the assumption is that if we're using a modified side, we're looking at a base 1 melee plus the +2 for 3. Like, sure, we could just use the 2 for the Maul and then flip it out, and like that's profit, so that's fine, because then we don't need the additional base, and we can pair it with whatever we get after. But the assumption here is that like the absolute worst sides we're gonna see are gonna be the +2 twice. So if we've used it twice, then we're looking at 6 damage. 6 damage is a huge chunk of most characters' health. So all of the like smaller utility guys, Balas, Night Sisters, like Rebel Troopers, Ezra's, Jar Jar's, 7-8 health. So that's almost a kill, not counting any other dice. So now once we get like an up tap, if we do it one more time, we're looking at 3 more. We're at 9. That's a lot of closer to main character health get killed at that. Asajj, Veers, like these guys aren't really played anymore. We're now looking at higher thresholds, but Yoda's at 10. So we're saying like if we got to use the dice each time, and we're not in the second untap, we're not counting the additional character die, that's a dead character. So like if you start off a round with, let's say, like Enrage, Maul Saber, and then somewhere in there you get a resource and you price a failure and untap, there's pretty good odds of guys dying, like one of their big guys or their big guy, because like killing a 13 health Obi with that would be kind of not tough, but you still have to kind of like fight through removal. But if your opponent didn't start with removal and you did that, like their guy's most likely dead. So yes, unfair, sure, whatever, but that's really done off the back of Maul Saber, and not particularly as much as the untaps. Because if that was, let's say, Kylo's lightsaber, which is pretty much 3 for a resource, +2, +3, and then the special is going to do 2 damage, potentially more if they had a shield. We are looking at like 4 damage, untap, 4 damage. So we're at 8, and that's using the untap. And like that's where the differential comes. Like Maul Saber is the big thing that's running that entire deck. Like if we look at 7th Boba has some good things going for it, but Maul Saber is probably the one that really does put it over the top. It gives you a lot of tricks with Boba's special. Boba's special can now be worth up to a 4. Sorry about my hand. And like with bait and switch and stuff like that, you're looking, oh, I have this 1 or 2 melee, and you're like, boom, this Maul Saber's not on a resource anymore, it's on a 4, smack your guy for 6. And like that's huge stuff. So like if you kind of weigh the options, the big thing that's going for that deck is the fact that it can use Maul Saber, which is ridiculous, and then it has the whole untap thing. So when it's combined with Maul Saber, it is outright bonkers. When it's combined with 7th and, let's say, like an ID9 or an Ancient, it's just very good. And when you get 2 untaps is when it goes crazy. So that's why round 2 is usually the round you get to do it, because the expectation there is that you got 1 upgrade, maybe 2, and now you have the resource to get the untap. So now when you're untapping and you're using 5 dice, because 7 Sister starts with her 3, and then 2 upgrades, you get the 5 there, and then when you get an untap, if you haven't used the ability die, you'll now have 6 dice in the pool, and you'll have been able to use a whole bunch of stuff at the single cost of, let's say, 1 for leadership and the tapping of your 1 die guy. Price of failure is a much higher cost, because if the other guy didn't take damage, you're looking at like a 6 to 9 total life loss for the 5 dice. But like that's still huge. It's much more bearable in other situations. I don't know who was trying to call me, but they're not getting picked up. So 1 second. Waiting for the traffic to slow so I could make sure there's no notification from my my store saying there's an issue. Okay. No notification from the store saying there's an issue. So yeah, it pretty much this is all about like busted cards. 1 second. Okay. There's about 20 minutes left. So yeah, busted cards and like the efficiency metrics behind them. So like Maul Saber's the big one there. The untaps with the 7th, I think, are, while it makes it a viable deck, doesn't make it the crazy explosiveness that we're currently seeing. And in general, 7th OTK has several problems, which can kind of just, you know, crush you. Because we are playing a 10 health deck. There's a lot of decks that can't deal with that, so it feels like an auto win versus a lot of matchups. But there's also probably a lot of matchups that were really close to an auto loss, or you have to like really fight through it and struggle. So we'll see where that ends up going. The level of skill required is also a bit higher with that, so that's why you don't. The people that you're seeing do very well with it tend to be the people from the Loops Discord, because there's a lot of information there for how to pilot BroTK like properly and efficiently. So whilst the deck does do very explosive stuff, it's the rounds where you're not doing the crazy shit that you really need to be able to know how to play and do. And it's very similar to Sabine in that regard. Like, Sabine does Sabine things, and like Sabine's things is like, I action cheated you and I have a fucking 2 and a 3. Like, sure, it doesn't hit every time. She's only 55% to hit damage when she does her rollout just by herself. So if we include, like, you know, a Hidden Blaster or X8, depending on whether we have a resource or something, like that metric changes a bit. But realistically, you have to still look at like Hidden Blaster. You still need to hit the base to go with the 2, and the 1 damage almost kind of doesn't matter until it's going to actually kill a guy. So it's not a huge thing there. The X8, if you don't have the resource, the 3 doesn't matter. Holdout, the 2 doesn't matter. The DL, the 3 doesn't matter if you don't have the resource to pay for it. So like we're often looking at, you know, 2 sides, and it's like a 1 and a 2. DL's a 3 and a 2, so like that's whatever. But they're not ginormous. But once you get to like round 3, things change immensely, because she has an upgrade or 2 out. If you haven't been able to threaten to kill her, she hasn't had to smash down second chances or impersonates and spend her resources instead of getting upgrades. And now you're looking at, okay, never tell me the odds to wipe your guy out, or wipe one guy out and put heavy damage on the second one. You're looking at, okay, I rolled in, I hit damage, cool, you know, kill your guy and then hyperspace jump away. And like these things is essentially where that deck goes much more broken. That opening round where you take 8 from the activation, that's just random. Like, that's not, the odds of that happening are very low. Like, her rolling 3-3 is only somewhere around 2.5% chance to actually occur. Her hitting both the 2 and a 3 in any combination is really only 11%. So 1 in 9 times is she going to actually do that. And so that means if a game lasted 3 rounds, like, because like the main character, you know, getting blown up, then over 3 matches, she's looking to do that 1 time. And like that's the thing that people don't take into consideration. They're like, oh, Sabine's broken. It's like, no, your deck sucks. That's why Sabine's broken. Like, yes, it's broken from a standpoint, but you didn't lose just because it's broken. You lose because your deck doesn't go broken. And like that's where the dilemma is. There's tons of broken stuff we could get to abuse. Like, Tarkin's ability is you know, quote unquote relatively broken when you think of it as, oh, I gave up 2 blanks. Finding the cheap cards to run in there requires like the deck construction, and it's a big pain in the ass. But like when you're playing against like a 27 health point team that's 3 wide, that ability is not so amazing until it actually piles in with the damage and starts killing. Obi Maz, whoa, Obi is ridiculous because he gets shields and he has 3s. It's like, yeah, no, he's ridiculous when he can afford the 3s and he rolls them and gets to resolve them. And like, so the Anthony's deck that he won Obi Maz with, he ran Running Interference, which is factually broken in certain situations, and then Concentrates, so he can flip to 3s and make it so that you couldn't interact with them. and then he would kill your guy off of it. That's fundamentally broken. Like, and like that's what it is. Like, we're looking at a bunch of characters who are very good. They have some broken tendencies, but it's the all-around cards to go with them that are making them factually broken. When you play, you know, Finn 1 fucking Mon Mothma, that's your own fault. Like, sure, maybe you're not playing Finn Mon Mothma, you're playing Ayla, Rose, Ezra vehicles. And, like, that deck could also be inherently considered broken because you have so much health and you started with a 5th die. You started ahead of the game. Like, sure, your damage is primarily indirect and you have to get vehicles, but that's the way the deck's precipiced. Like, when you stick down a Y-Wing and you start doing 4 indirect to people to combine with your, like, 3 damage from characters and you got extra resources and, like, tech-teamed and rally aid stuff, like, your rally aid generates 2 resources every time it hit a vehicle that cost 2 or more. Like, I don't know about you, but that's what we get for resources around. Is that not broken? When C-3PO switches, you know, a 2 indirect to 2 focus, and now you flipped over to, you know, another 3 indirect and, like, a 2 base to combine with, you know, Ezra's +2 or something like that. Like, this is all stuff that is essentially broken. Like, we're bypassing things that normally can't be done. Like, it's normally an upgrade, here's my die, that's it. And we're just like, alright, well, we're not playing with the die sides that are actually printed on the dice. You know, where we're starting with the 5th die, we have, you know, 7 health more than other characters. We don't lose when our 10 health character dies. Like, there's different things going for each deck, and you have to play accordingly. Like hyperspace jump. Oh my god, that thing's broken. I didn't get my turn. No, it's broken because Sabine got to roll out, do her stuff, then you rolled out your 1 die because your deck's actually a slow deck. But do you have access to things like scruffy looking Nerf herder that can actually, like, peek into their hand and rip the event out? Do you have access to disrupt that would keep them off of the 3 resources? It goes much more broken when combined with RI, and they, like, Sabine do whatever, smash your guy, you can't roll out. Because, like, now, if you had some sort of action cheat, you can't. Actually, I guess an action cheat would just bypass that. But if they'd like truced or something to make it so you can't play a card, now we're talking different games. But, like, somebody with fast hands and disrupt can interrupt that. If you had your own RI to then cast something with RI, assuming that they just said, like, you can't activate or something, then you get to prevent them from hyperspace jumping. But, like, that doesn't really work either, because if they RI, you can't activate character, and you cast, like, a truce and RI yourself, you still can't activate, so you're not going to get to resolve a die. But, like, there's different things that they all function together to make it broken. If you played hyperspace jump in vehicles, it wouldn't be broken because your deck's not fast enough. So, like, your deck has to be geared toward the different options. Poe Hondo, Yoda chaining with specials. Like, these are all things that can essentially be abused. Force Wave, I think, is an amazing card that a lot of people really haven't been able to use efficiently yet. The best way, or the best place to really use Force Wave is on Yoda, or off of Yoda specials, because you get to change the die to the special while it's affording the 1 to be able to resolve the Force Wave special. Assuming you're not playing against a single Palpatine, Force Wave's 5 for 1, like 3 to them, 2 to them, 1 to yourself, in the worst case scenario versus a 2-character deck, is still very, very good. And now, especially if you take into consideration, like, Cunnings, and you can make yourself survive to do that, like, at least twice. We're talking, like, 10 damage, and you've taken 2. Like, that's ginormous. Because that'll often be half of the starting health of a team, and if the opponent's team has the 3 characters to have that 26 or 27 health, then instead you've done 12, because you didn't have to take 1 yourself. You just went 6 and 6. And that's off of, you know, a single upgrade, using it twice. And then that's not counting any of your upgrades, or if you get to use it a 3rd time. Because now the 3rd time we're talking, you know, 15 to them, 3 to you. The 3 to you starts to pile up, so you got to be careful with that. But against any of the 3-character decks, like, we're talking, that's 18 damage. you're at the level where you still had the other character dice to potentially knock guys off the table, or have then decided to knock them off after doing that force wave. So like somewhere along the line, the force wave is just going to be useless, but on the way there, you've done like massive amounts of damage. So like the newer stuff that's going to be abused, I think, will be backed by force wave, especially if we get some sort of nerfs that hit like Sabines and RIs or Maul Sabers. I'm really hoping we don't see a point cost adjustment to Seven Sister, because I think if Maul Saber like was never printed, the deck would be crazy hard to win with, because a lot of these crazy rounds are coming off of Maul Saber or kind of just luck. Like if it's not with a Maul Saber, it's pretty lucky. But we'll kind of see how it go from there. We still got like a good 10 minutes, so yeah, man, it's just really about broken stuff. Like Mill is probably the least broken, because it has to just do stuff slowly, but it has a thing going for it in that it makes a lot of the opponent's cards more useless, because every time they cast a piece of die removal, if they're just trading one card in hand for one die, like you're kind of helping the Mill's game plan. The get 5 shields for 3 is not actually broken. Popping your shields to mill your opponent for each one of the shields, not particularly broken. The reconversion only uses Yoda with 1 die, so like you're really giving up a lot. It's a lot of like small functional things that are just adding up together. Being able to see 3PO for 2 or 3 discard, that one's actually broken, and probably how they win most of their games. And then they have hyperspace jump to seal the deal at the end, or prevent the like god roll and then get to their battlefield. So like that one was probably the least of the broken decks, or the decks abusing like broken things. What else we got? We talked about the vehicle and the whole like rally generating tons of resources, starting with the 5th die. Modified Hawk is a pretty terrible card until you actually Rose special those damages off, in which case it becomes pretty busted. But it starts with that inherent issue. So if you've successfully gotten the 2 damage off of it, like it's really hard to complain about that card. Most of the other like 2 and 3 drop supports cost 3, and so like they're not really broken. T-47 only has two damage sides, so like it's hard to complain about that. Ezra's very good from like a control perspective, but when your opponent has no resources, a lot of his die sides fall off. Force speed by itself, not very good. Pretty amazing when you include like focuses or any cards that interact with dice. It becomes running interference level good, because it'll be like, alright, force speed, concentrate, flip my dice, hit you. Force speed, never tell me the odds, flip to 11, you didn't know I was going to do this, hit you. A lot of sneaky stuff in there. Philpa's always pretty good. I'm trying to think what else recently won. Hondo's special it ends up being an Ezra special or 3 damage, and like we already feel Ezra's very good, so that makes Hondo like downright destructive. The only dilemma is that later into the game you can afford to pay Hondo off, and doing Ezra specials later in the game when you want damage is not very good, especially when you don't have an alternative. So relatively balanced to an extent. Very unfortunate though. Trying to think what else is there. Yoda's actually pretty broken. So the whole 13-point character thing is like, alright, 13-point utility character, this is fine. Not having a blank, I think, is still also fine. Just those specials in the 2 focus are hugely impactful. Getting a resource is a very big die side, I guess, on cards. So then being able to flip another die or get a special, I mean not a special, sorry, being able to flip another die or get a shield is very, very strong. but he does need like outside help, I guess I'd say. Like that special is not going to do much on its own, but if you take into consideration we have a bunch of cards with specials that are very good specials, and that the whole like you can do it in one action, very good, hard to interrupt. On any of the characters that he's running with the like big damage, so like Sabine, flip to a 3, then hit your guy, and that situation is different because it's only one Yoda die. But like with Zeb, you can flip to 2s, 3s if you want to pay for it, but I don't like really paying that one resource for the 1 damage. You got Hondos, flip Hondo to a special while netting a resource, and like Hondo for a resource or 3s, stick more upgrades down. Overall, it affords you things that other decks can't do. And that's kind of why you give up actual damage dice to run Yoda, because Yoda's efficiency metric is like through the roof. It only takes 1 special to use both of his dice to then have 2 resources plus shield or changing one of the other dice. When you have to chain his specials off of his specials, you're actually getting a reduction in I guess the goodness of his die, because the thinking is that there's pretty good odds you had cards to reroll with. So if you instead had just took his special for like the resource in particular, something like a shield, that can often be worth more than changing another die. But it's all dependent on like when you're doing it. Like let's say if you left the special sitting there for long enough, where you've re-rolled a couple times, and now every single die side you have is on a side that you want, then you don't need that switching side for Yoda. You don't need to give up the efficiency off of the other Yoda die to do it, because like let's say you're gonna re-roll twice. Instead of using the special to change the other Yoda special, you had a 75% chance to hit the 2 focus or a special. So that means you would have gained an additional positive there, whether it was a shield, flipping an additional die on top of the one you would have gained from the first Yoda special, or milling the opponent one if you wanted to. So like these are relatively big things. A lot of people just go in with Yoda and just start chaining specials, but don't even really know what they want to do. Whereas like those times where you hit double Yoda special on the rollout are just magnificent, and unless the opponent's at like easy pickings you, then that just feels real bad. But if you hit both the specials and you just took like 2 resources and 2 shields, like that's huge. You end up using character dice for shields in general at times, because you either don't want to reroll or something like that, or you take it for a resource. So then that means that his die was at least a minimum 1.5 of another die, or potentially worth 2. So like yes, it's his best side, so it's problematic, but he also has the 2 focus, and the 2 focus is very strong as well. So we'll kind of see where this ends up leading with Yoda. But Yoda's also inherently broken, because like 3 useful sides, and then if you whiff, you're still looking at disrupt, discard, shield. So like the shield is half of his ability, half of his special. So like it feels bad to use it, but the disrupt and the discard, there's going to be key times where that's huge. Your opponent has 1 card left, their most recent reroll's not that great, or you're going to go like flip other dice, so you want to make sure they don't have any removal. That discard's ginormous there. Your opponent has some pay sides, they have 1 resource, your disrupt becomes very big there. So like the shield ends up being like the worst side, since the shield also exists via the specials. But we'll kind of just see where a lot of this stuff ends up going. But pay attention to cards. Try to think like, all right, how efficient is this card? How broken is it? And don't complain about the broken stuff. Like if you're a casual, that's fine. Like that's your prerogative. But when you go to a big event and then you're like, oh, I got blasted by OTK, stuff's so unfair. It's like, what the hell were you playing? Like, sure, you're playing Sabine Ezra, and then you got blasted by OTK round 1, and you're essentially complaining about unfair, but you also have an unfair deck. They just, OTK just has a better matchup versus as a Sabine. So it's just like, why are you complaining? Someone wrote it earlier, where it's kind of like the people that aren't playing Sabine complain about Sabine. The people that aren't playing about OTK complain about OTK. People who just hate playing against Mill complain about Mill. Like, it's relatively accurate from that standpoint. It's just like people are complaining about the stuff they lose to, and that's just how we are as humans. We want to complain about stuff. That's fine, but like, don't really believe in it. There's gonna be a link for Sirloin's introducing the scrub, and like, it sounds kind of crazy if you feel like offended by this, but like, feel free to. But go read this thing. It's very relevant. When you sit there and you think, well, I don't want to play Yoda because Yoda's broken, I don't want to be broken, or I don't want to net deck a deck because I don't want to net deck. Like, you're just hampering yourself. Like, this is from the big event standpoint. I'm not talking about like a casual local. Like, realistically, casual local should be more fun. But when you're looking to go to like a regionals or a store champ or nationals or worlds, like, is the goal not to win? Like, that's the intent, right? Like, so if your goal is to win, you gotta go where, you gotta go there with what you think you have the best chance of winning with, and you gotta do your best to not like handicap yourself. But yeah, definitely read the link with the Sirloin thing. Hopefully it's very eye-opening for a lot of people. It's just another article, but or really for some people. But if like even good players can read this and like hope to better themselves. Especially if you start getting to like the advanced stuff with like Yomi and the whole like understanding what the opponent's gonna do, and then you understand, so then you like counter stuff. Like a lot of us don't consider the actual going on. So I was like, of realistically like what we're thinking during like the games and whatnot. But so for deck building, I would definitely say it is imperative to kind of be able to determine what is what are the broken cards, and how can you best use them. Can you mash any more of them together? Can you like change your character pairing to best use them? So like RI plus any of the die swap cards or die face changing cards are very strong when you can get a 3 or a 4. Like using a bait and switch on, I don't even know what the hell it would be bad on, to be honest. I'm trying to think of something that just has a bunch of 1s. So like if you use a bait and switch, no, you can lowbots for good. Alright, so I got nothing. But if let's say you have some shitty die that's like 1 damage, 1 focus, 1 shield, 1 resource, 1 disrupt. Using a bait and switch there is fucking terrible. But when you have bait and switch to find like Boba's special, to then special somebody's 3 or 4, that is amazing. When you have bait and switch to like find your base side to pair with that +4 on Maul, amazing. Bait and switch on that Maul to get +4 to pair with your base side, amazing. So like that's amazing because it represents a potential plus value of 2 in general on normal dice, and then like on specific dice you're looking at a potential for like 3s and 4s. Like Sabine obviously can't run it, but if Sabine could, she could hit a 3, but like on Zeb you'd have to have paid the resource for it. So like these are all things that matter a lot. On Vader you were getting 3s off of it, and that's why it was amazing. It was a little filthy sometimes when you had to do it on a Tusken Raider and pay for the 1, but sometimes you're going to pay for that 1 and take it. It would not be so good on a holdout blaster if you need to find that stupid 2-for-1 pay side and didn't have like a bunch of modifies that you were struggling to find a base with. So it's you got to find the busted cards and try to think like how can you best use them, and don't focus too much on the super broken like comboed cards. Like look at cards as a single whole. Like Force Wave is actually broken. That special is ridiculous. If it was a special on one side, then it's kind of whatever. Like Force Throw can also be deemed as ridiculous or broken. It's much harder to use, but Force Throw on a Yoda, whole other ball game, because you're looking at eating an opponent's die and then throwing damage at them. Now, if you stop A 2 damage, your Force Throw special was essentially worth 4 damage. The fact that it prevented you from taking 2, and it dealt 2 more. If you take into consideration that people were playing, well, Reversal's terrible, but if Reversal cost 2, it would pretty much meet that metric standard of I mitigated your die and did like a lightsaber throw to you, which is 2 damage when you're showing a melee. So like that's about efficient for a 2 cost item, 2 cost like event, and it's often not good enough. But when you're paying 3 for an upgrade and you get to do this multiple times, it becomes actually broken. So like, why is Force Throw not run with Yoda? I don't know. But if you take someone's Maul Saber and you chuck it at their head for 4, sure as hell they're going to be bitching that whole time. So like, kind of think about these things that have that are just good in themselves, and see how you can break the interaction. So like Obi's lightsaber, 2 base plus 3, double shield, special that gets you a shield and deals unblockable damage. So like, if you just ran this in general, it's like, oh, okay, this is fine. Like, it's 2 damage, 3 damage if you have another base, 2 health, 2 effective health, 2 effective health, and the special at worst is gain a health, deal an unblockable. But when you do some Yoda chains and you're like gaining shields in between, now it's gain a shield, deal 3 unblockable. Because off of a Yoda special, you could have went shield, flip the other Yoda, do the Yoda special, shield, flip the Obi Saber, get the 3rd shield, do 3 unblockable. So like, your 3 dice transformed into gain 3 health, deal 3 unblockable. So assuming the opponent doesn't have access to like intimidates or frightens, or other stuff that's also unblockable, when they need to get through this, like each round, like that 3 die thing is doing the equivalent to 6 total health. You saving 3 and dealing 3 to them. These are things that people really have to take into consideration and see what's the best way to kind of use and abuse them. So we'll see where we end up, but there's tons of okay interactions that become much more broken because where we have all these other things to combo with them. So like, Night Sister is inherently broken because at the cost of killing her, you can get 7 untaps. Realistically, you probably get about 3 before someone puts 4 into her and just nails the coffin shut. But the fact that when you pitch a card to reroll a single die, like, she's equivalent to that. You just take a damage to do that. And for the most part, if you're trying to reroll like 3, 4, 5 dice, you're not going to ping her 3 or 4 times to reroll each of those dice once. You're just going to pitch a card from your hand, reroll the 3 of them, and now reassess where you're at. Okay, one of your dice hit a blank, so now you're just trying to get whatever benefit out of it. So she'll take a damage, give you the benefit if you're assuming that 5 of the sides are alive for you, and that's where she becomes, broken. Sienna has 2 resource sides, and like at 11 points, she's 2 dice. Her +2 is not so great, but the disrupt's very useful. So like, she's not as broken there, but if you take into consideration she could actually use vehicles at the cost of, or reuse a vehicle at the cost of 2. If there was a very strong vehicle, she could essentially be viewed as broken. So like, ATST sucks, but if you were able to use it twice at the cost of 2, like, we're talking 2 resources for 3, 4, 5 damage. Pirate Speeder Tank is what? 3, 4 indirect, 5 indirect, a special that could do 2 shields and 2 damage and get another action? Like, yeah. Pirate Speeder Tank costs 5 though, so it's like, but take this stuff into consideration. Look for the broken cards, and kind of just try to use them to the best you can. And like, realistically, that's how decks are being built. Like, 0 cost removal could essentially be viewed as broken, because while it tends to be a bit weaker than the 1 cost stuff, like 1 resource is the equivalent to a die. So like, how would I say this? So let's say you electroshock something and you paid a resource. You could kind of view it like a he doesn't like you, because at any point in the game where you resolve a resource die and then you use the electroshock, you gave up your die to eat their die. But this meant you gave up a die with a resource. So it's more restrictive than he doesn't like you, because he doesn't like you can just take a blank and then eat an opponent's die. So, like, he doesn't, and it doesn't require spot yellow, and it doesn't require it to be 2 value or less. So, like, you can view these things very similarly. Oh shit, okay, I gotta go. So, but you can view them as broken because they're just way better variations. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Honestly, guys, with the Hyperloop's reporting out. Could probably talk about this for a long, long time, but we're looking at 50 minutes. Deuces!